don't atrophy. A lot of people get to a certain point within their career and they just stop. And whatever they knew at that point in time, whether it's a technology, whether it's a social media platform, whether it's a way of thinking, they just get stuck in that particular viewpoint and they never move on. Make sure that you're always, again, pushing your brain to accept new things, try new things, and not just go, this worked at this point in time and I was happy for me and it worked for me. Keep trying to exercise that muscle that is the brain and change and keep changing.
Okay, welcome to the Rubasha Family Podcast. We have a very, very special guest in the building. I have David Fuller, who's a fractional CMO. Now, David Fuller's experience is quite powerful. Over 30 years, we're talking about 3 decades of applying new and disruptive technologies to marketing strategy and bringing customer-centric products to international markets. A digital transformation solutions consultant who understands how to apply technology in a sustainable and profitable way. And those are quite powerful words, in a sustainable and profitable way. He's currently building strategies of the intersection of technologies and trends like blockchain, IoT, Web3, and the metaverse while growing the technology of today, like e-commerce and AI. With quite vast experience in this world of marketing, it's a pleasure to have you on, David.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me on.
No worries. So I just gave such a quite stellar background, over 30 years. And one thing that's really stood out is the way you apply new and disruptive technologies to marketing strategy. And the number one thing, of course, is bringing that customer-centric products to international markets. So can you just take us a little bit back on how you got started? Where did this passion lie in solving problems around marketing and using technology around a customer-centric approach?
Yeah, so Gen X, which is often the generation that gets forgotten between the boomers and the millennials and everyone else. Everyone ignores and forgets about Gen X. But Gen X is a really interesting cohort because we were the first ones to sort of get PCs. You know, I remember seeing Apple E when I was sort of 8 or 9 years old and being blown away by, I had a Commodore 64 computer when I was young, which I guess I kind of got the bug for technology and coding and digital kind of back then. And, then we were in our, I guess, early 20s when mobile phones became democratized. And I had a sort of Nokia banana phone, the one used in the Matrix when I was back there. So I guess I was always sort of at impressionable age when some of those technologies came about. I was at university in Melbourne when I first saw Mosaic web browser demonstrated to me. So, yeah, just right in that impressionable time when some of those technologies were coming to market. So I think that's probably where it came from.
Marketing is all about storytelling. Dad, when we first started this business, what did you say to me?
I said, yes, we do a podcast.
Why?
Because I want to tell our story.
Why?
Because I know the story builds a legacy.
Builds a legacy. And that is exactly what we do here at ETS Rubasha Media. We market your story on social media so you could build a legacy for those who come after you, to build your business and your personal brand.
Yeah, follow us on our platform. Go on our website, etsrubashamedia.com.
This is about legacy, and it is about showing up on social media every single day, because if you don't show up, your competition will. And then where did the passion of marketing come into play?
So I actually started in sales, and I got an internship with Procter & Gamble when I was at university, and that was a really interesting experience. They gave me, it was 3 months over the university summer break. They gave me a station wagon full of Vicks cough cold medication. They gave me 20 pharmacies, and they said, go and sell this stuff. And obviously Procter & Gamble was back then one of the, if you wanted to work in branding or marketing, Procter & Gamble was one of those companies, along with Unilever and Nestle, Coca-Cola, that, if you wanted to do marketing, they were the companies that you wanted to go and work for. So that was amazing to sort of get a foot in the door and see how they did marketing and how they did branding, how they broke out what they call trade marketing. So understanding the difference of selling to a supermarket and those types of things. So yeah, did that with Procter & Gamble. Then I went back to uni for a year And then I got a role with their competitor, Unilever. Yeah, I went and worked for Unilever, which again, you know, I walked out of my university course, I actually studied economics with a little bit of marketing, but I'll come back to that. Yeah, I walked out of university and into my first boss's office, and he basically said, "Forget everything you've learned. Your education starts now." So yeah, that was that was also a great place to start.
I like that saying in terms of, drop everything your education starts now. When we talk about working with the big companies such as Procter and Gamble, what did you learn from there that you saw around marketing and branding? What do those big companies do well that the medium markets here, companies from 5 to 50 million in revenue, what can they learn from the big corporate giants around marketing and how to apply that for the long game?
So I think it really is dependent on the industry that you're in, although there are some marketing fundamentals that don't change irrespective of what you're doing. I think companies like Procter and Gamble, they're both very different because Procter and Gamble is a US company and Unilever is a European company. Unilever has had its head offices in Amsterdam and in London, and so they had they had quite different approaches. One was very much an American kind of attitude, and the other one was a little bit more European. But I think the things that stood out were process and actually taking time to make decisions. And that's maybe something we can come back to. We'll talk about AI later. But process was one thing. So I remember that as a salesperson for Procter and Gamble, they had a manual, and they said, right, this is how a sales call works. This is what you do. These are the things you have to do. First time you step into a supermarket, you go and look at the shelves on the front. You see who's on promotion. You see what your competitors are doing. You see what the prices are. You then go and walk to the shelves and you have a look at your products on the shelves. Are they in stock? Are they out of stock? Are your competitors, where are they on the shelf in terms of eye positioning? And what are your competitors doing in terms of their pricing? Are there any new entrants into the market? It didn't matter whether you were an intern or whether you were the CEO. You were encouraged to walk into a supermarket once a week to see what the market was actually happening in your market. So it wasn't just sitting in the back room looking at research or Google results. It was saying, okay, this is what's happening on the floor. And I think that's also a really interesting grounding. It's actually quite easy to do marketing in a hyper growth market. It's really hard to do marketing if you're trying to sell soap in a mature market with 1% or 0.5% growth every year, and you've got 10 competitors that have been around for 100 years. The Sunlight brand of soap was invented in 1884. Branding's been around for hundreds of years in that sense. And that was Unilever. That was Lever Brothers who first invented branding as we know it with Sunlight soap in the 1800s. So that really gives you an idea. So yeah, if you think you're a great marketer, go and try and market something that's not growing in a really mature market, and then that'll really put you to the test.
I think that's quite powerful. I really liked how you said that, everything, they have a process, and again, whether you're the CEO or an intern, you're there in the field, right? Look, seeing what's happening. I like the book from Vern Harnish on scaling up, and he talks about companies, Walmart, they were on, spending their team huddle in the stores, right? So that's quite powerful. Can you talk to us a little bit about technology and how technology plays a big role around marketing and helping a company scale and reach their revenue targets?
Yeah, so I think probably the biggest advantage that technology can bring to a marketing person is data. And so it's, and again, back a long time ago, you didn't necessarily have data. You had what the supermarkets, I'm talking about physical here rather than SaaS or digital products, but some of the fundamentals are kind of the same. If you don't have any information, you don't have any data, then you're flying blind. You're making decisions as to, well, I'm going to use this social media platform to try and hit my target market, but I've got no idea actually whether my target market are on that platform or not. What is the median price and what are my competitors doing? Am I discounting? I think the biggest thing that technology has brought to marketing is information that allows marketers to make better decisions in theory. That's not always the case, but it should. But then obviously there's a couple of other things that it can bring to the market. One is new products. So there are product categories that didn't exist because of technology that now do exist. Business models change. So, for example, Airbnb or Uber are business models that are created because of the technology that couldn't be done by incumbents, before that technology existed. If you look at some of the decentralized fintech products that are coming out of blockchain that blockchain allows, again, those products couldn't be offered to customers without that blockchain technology. And sometimes you're too early. Sometimes you're too early to market. You say, oh, this is a fantastic new shiny toy. AI might be one of those things at the moment that you kind of, it's a solution looking for a problem. But yeah, I think technology there's a lot of ways. Obviously what a lot of people understand to be marketing today, which is the advertising and promotion side of things, changes all the time because of technology. The ability to be able to create ads quickly and disseminate them to millions of people instantly and having viral effects and whatever else. But yeah, there's a lot of impact of technology on the marketing mix.
Wow, powerful. Very, very powerful. And especially I love how you talked about around the data side of things and then also into new products. So, you wrote your latest article about how economics make the best marketers, right? What exactly does that mean?
So again, this comes back to my theory that marketing has been kind of siloed into what used to be just a subset of marketing, and that's the advertising and promotion side of marketing. The tactical growth building, the performance side, we go and spend this amount of money and we want to get this return immediately from that spend. And it's called marketing for a reason, because it's about markets. And markets operate on a set of principles that, if you understand microeconomic theory, you know that, for example, at the very, very basic level, there's demand and supply. Okay. And so sometimes you can break those rules. So you've got a certain amount of demand, you've got a certain amount of supply, and there's an equilibrium where they meet. And if there's an excess of demand, then the prices can be higher. If there's an excess of supply, the prices will be lower. But you have control over pricing, because pricing is also a signal. You can go out to the market if you're a price leader and you say, if you're Apple and you say, right, the price of our mobile phone is going to be $1,000, even though the functionality set of that mobile phone is no different to a $100 phone that you can pick up from a Chinese brand. I picked up a phone in Dubai a couple of weeks ago from a brand called HMD. I've never heard of them. It's an eSIM phone. It does absolutely everything that the latest Apple phone does, at a tenth of the price. So the only reason that Apple can charge $1,000 for the phone that's got $100 worth of functionality is because they've spent 20 years building a brand, which is the other part of marketing, or another element of marketing. But then there's also, I think, as a marketer, you need to understand things like opportunity cost. Every time somebody makes a decision to buy your product, it's because they're deciding not to choose something else. They've got $20 to spend. Are they going to spend it on a latte, or are they going to spend it on a juice? And that's also, there's other behavior in there as well, like substitution. So if you ask a bad marketer who their competition is, they'll say nobody. You ask some marketers who their competition is, and they'll say, well, if I'm Apple, my competition is Samsung. But actually, your competition is anything that your customer might spend that money on otherwise. So if you are NASCAR, you compete with theme parks. If you are, a football stadium, you're competing with a shopping mall, because you're competing for people's time on a Sunday afternoon or Saturday afternoon or a Sunday afternoon. They don't have to go and watch football. They could do something else. And so the substitutions that consumers make are not always obvious. And I think marketers need to understand some of those consumer behavior when they're building their marketing strategy out. And there's a whole bunch of other microeconomic principles, like utility, for example. Again, Uber and others have said it's not just about the financial value of this product, it's about convenience. A consumer has a trade-off as to whether they say, okay, do I get in my car, go down to the local takeaway, pick up my Chinese, or do I pay an extra $10 to get a guy on a motorbike to deliver it for me? And they're making that choice. So, yeah, I think that marketers really do need to go back to some of the fundamentals, need to understand which market are you competing in, right? Are you competing in your local market because you're selling a good that somebody is going to drive a maximum of 10 kilometers to get that item? Are you competing in your state market? Are you competing in your national market? Are you competing in an international market? You have to define all of those things before you even start. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm arguing that marketing is much bigger than just where are we going to spend our paid advertising budget, in the next month. It's thinking about some of these really big picture items.
Yeah. And I like how you said, a bad marketer says there's no competition. A good marketer goes and understands that. And yes, that economy plays such a big role. In such a day and age now, branding, the power of branding, you see what McKinsey and company have come out with. What are your thoughts on trust and authenticity? And why do you think so many CMOs are still so behind on this? I mean, it's as clear as day. And then my even next question, or you can see which order you want to answer this question. You talked about convenience and how, people want convenience. So is it around storytelling or showing that convenience when it comes on a marketing aspect?
So convenience is just one type of utility. I'll come back to that. In terms of the first question, I don't think any CMO who's worth anything thinks that branding ever went away. McKinsey in their latest report sort of argued that branding was some sort of relic or ancient concept that had been forgotten, and that suddenly European marketing directors who they'd surveyed were saying that branding was back again. I don't think it ever left. And again, if you talk to Apple, or you talk to some of the big brands, a brand basically allows you to change that law of supply and demand and command a higher price. Because the only difference between the actual bits of what you're selling and the price that you're selling it at is the brand, which is why some brands can charge a lot more than anyone else. There's no the function of a Toyota Prius is exactly the same as the function of a Ferrari. They both do exactly the same thing. They're both a car with four wheels. They've both got a steering wheel. They've both got whatever else. But the reason that one is so much more expensive than the other is brand. And so if you are in a commoditized market, and let's face it, most markets these days are commoditized. Even a project management SaaS tool, if you look at all the project management tools on the market, they all do exactly the same thing. You look at these, the current generation of LLM, ChatGPT, Gemini style AIs, they all do exactly the same thing. And so if I've got a choice of 5 different products that all do the same thing and provide me the same utility, then the only thing I'm going to make my choice on is brand. And there's some other things around that, right? So it's not just, again, so we come back to utility. For some people, it's literally just, I go and buy this Thai takeout because I'm hungry, right? There's a certain amount of utility that I get from that, which is I feel like I'm not hungry anymore once I've eaten. My other choice is to say, right, I'm going to go out, I'm going to spend a ton of money in a 5-star restaurant with a celebrity chef. Now, why would I do that? I'm not doing that because I'm hungry. I'm doing that because there's a certain amount of virtue signaling. I want to sort of say to, my peers or promote or say, hey, look at me. I'm successful enough to be able to afford to go to a 5-star restaurant and eat in a celebrity chef restaurant. That's nothing to do with the product, the quality of the food. That's to do with what the consumer is getting out of it, which is ego and virtue signaling and a whole bunch of other stuff. So there's some really complicated psychological things going on in there. And as a marketer, you need to understand what is driving your consumer. Is it ego? Is it FOMO? Are they buying this because they've got fear of missing out? Are they doing it because they feel anxiety and they want to buy insurance because they're a risk-averse person and they want to feel safe? Are they someone who just wants to, save money? Are they someone who wants to show off to their friends? So there's a whole bunch of reasons why people buy one brand or another. And as a marketer, you have to understand what is that driver that's making those people buy that thing, and how much will they pay for it. Maybe you're leaving money on the table. Maybe you're discounting a product and you're selling it at $2 when it could be, you could sell it for $8.
And it's so powerful. And I think even when you look at it, like how said that a lot of now everything's becoming commoditized, right? It's such a crowded marketplace. And when you build that brand, you actually filter out the customers that you don't want, because the customers that you don't want, 5 of the same thing that, products or services that can do the same things, the customers that maybe are not part of your tribe or you want to attract, they're going to make their choice based on price. So now it's just a race down to the bottom. But the ones who have that powerful brand, they attract the best customers who, stick around the longest, who value their service or product the most. So I think it's quite important what you're saying around branding, and it's never really gone. It's always been here. And I think it's just been exposed just more and more because, the playing field is now easier. We can start media companies. We can, create a podcast. We don't need to have a $200,000 ad on the television anymore. No, even by doing this is us using that blueprint around the personal brand. So what are your thoughts around AI and how people are using AI at the moment around marketing and even just business development in general?
Yeah, so I think, like I said, I'm an early adopter of all kinds of technologies, and so I'm not out there to bash AI. I think there's some really interesting user cases that we can apply. I would caution marketers from using AI without thinking of some of the consequences. So let me just step back and say why I say that. As I just said, marketing is kind of a visceral, subjective art form. There is some, if you're doing database marketing, there is some science to it, but it's an emotional activity, and AI has no lived experience. So AI can't tell you which Thai takeout tastes better because it's never tasted one. It can't tell you which aftershave is more suited to you because it can't smell. And so I'm talking about physical products, but it also can't do real world comparisons about UX, for example. So if I'm using an app and I find that there's friction in using that UX, AI can't really experience that as I experience it. So at the moment, I think there are some things that basically say, okay, well, that doesn't line up with doing great marketing. I think the other thing is that speed reduces quality, and so you were just talking about how we don't need to invest in a satellite dish and broadcast technology in order to deliver this to customers. And this is going to sound a little bit old manish, but when I traveled around Asia, I had a film camera, and you had 36 frames of film, and you had to really choose what you were going to take a photo of. You had to sit there and say, I'm going to compose this, because you then had to pay to process every single one of them, right? So you take it into the pharmacy and you get your film roll processed, and it would cost you money for every single photo you developed, which actually made you a little bit more thoughtful as to which photos you really wanted to take. Whereas now you can take 1,000 photos in a minute, you never look at them, there's no downside, it doesn't matter if they're a bit crap because, whatever. There's no skin in the game. And similarly, I think if you look at some television series or some films, there's an indulgence that, a director says, well, I'm not constrained by how much film is in a canister anymore. I can shoot 2 hours of film and I don't have to think about the edit, and I can be a bit lazy, and and I'm not really being very customer centric because I'm just being a bit lazy. Because I'm like, I don't need to edit it because it can be 2.5 hours long, even though most consumers don't want it to be that long. So I think the ability to just be able to, just because you can do something quickly, perhaps reduces the quality. So rather than, thinking about an email and composing it and doing the due diligence and doing the lead scoring and making sure that email is the most relevant it could possibly be to give you the best chance of converting that cold person into a lead. If you make a mistake, so for example, I got a LinkedIn one this morning, which I get every day, which is sort of like, hey, I see we share a bunch of connections, we should connect. I go back and I check and it's like, we don't share any connections. So either you're being disingenuous or you're just not thinking, and you're just pushing that out because that's what the AI has told you to send out, because it says, oh, you will build trust if you say we share connections. But if I then look and check and you don't share connections with me, why would I start a business relationship with you? Either you're lazy or you're not being honest with me. So yeah, there's some real brand safety challenges there if your AI is sending out messaging that doesn't line up with your brand positioning, or violates the trust that people have maybe put in your or built. And so that's a big. Obviously, sometimes I get that when I see communications from a sales team or from a marketing operations team that send me a message, and I think the brand manager or the marketing manager must be pulling their hair out if they saw that message being sent out to customers. I've spent a whole bunch of money trying to get customers to think about my brand and be aware of my brand. And so when they get that email, they actually open it because they see who it's from. And then the message that's in that is completely the opposite of the message that I'm trying to build.
I'm so glad that you brought that up. And I know we talked about earlier the same thing with me. I actually received one the other day. Hello, Sujiro. We've been connected on LinkedIn for a while, and I've never really made an effort to engage with you. As a design agency, we're always on the lookout for exciting projects, blah, blah, blah. And then I just replied and said, how long have we been connected for? And then no reply. I actually always reply to them because they're just rubbish messages, but then I'll question them on it. Some don't reply. And then I even say to some people, oh, was this an automation or did you write this? And I actually give them advice because it's so true. They're just using it blindly, and it's a bad rep. Who wants to do business like that? And then, oh, can we just hop on a quick call? It's like, whoa, like, so it's so true. It's just the way people are using it. And so, for example, we run a cold outreach as part of what we do in terms of client acquisition, right? We help our CEOs, our clients go in and add clients onto their business. And cold outreach is important, right? We need to fill up the pipeline. And so even personally for us, that's why I think this is such a good conversation, because that's where the marketing and the sales come into play. Because number one, a lot of these people, they'll send those messages and then you go on their profile, maybe one post, you barely even see anything. Not only have you not personalized the message, but then when I come on your profile, where is the credibility? Where is the authority? Where is the positioning? And that's that interchange between that sales and marketing. But like you said, using AI in a way, if we're going to, because for us, it's a numbers game, right? If we contact the right amount of your ICP with powerful messaging, it's bound to convert with a personal brand. But those messages, instead of just a lot of, yes, you can do it with volume, but they have to be quality. They have to be of value. You have to provide something and actually personalize. So I'm just so glad you brought that up. And can you talk a little bit about your experience with sales as well? Because you have that experience, which makes you unique for a fractional CMO, because you're not just coming from a marketing perspective, but you also have that sales background to combine those two. What do you think the sales and marketing engines get wrong with when it comes to marketing, and why, sometimes do they need a fractional CMO like you? They don't have the budget for a full-time CMO, but having that fractional CMO to help them bridge that gap between sales and marketing, because when they get that right, that's when they can grow. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, there's a few questions in there. I think one, and I've on record as saying, I think that this current kind of fad of lead generation is a bit of a pyramid scheme. Leads are nothing. And as a data-driven marketer, the metrics that I'm interested in are cost of acquisition. I'm not looking at cost per lead. Cost per lead means absolutely nothing to me. It's like likes on a Facebook page. I can get 1 million likes, but if nobody actually puts their hand in their pocket and spends the money, then the likes are meaningless. So as a marketing person, my metric is cost of acquisition. How much does it cost me to acquire that customer? But the other metric that I am really passionate about, that again, a lot of marketers really neglect, is customer lifetime value, right? And so it's not just about the next quarter. It's not just, okay, how much did it, yes, it cost us $200 to acquire this customer, and they've only bought a $50 product from us. But if they come back next month and buy another $50, and the next month and buy another $50, and the next month and cost another $50, and you actually look at their lifetime value is 10 grand and it cost you $200 to acquire them, then that's a really good, good number. So, and that's where some of the conflict between short-term sales KPIs and some of the longer-term marketing KPIs seem to conflict. And so I think it's important that both understand why they're doing a certain thing, because we've all got the same goal at the end, right? We're trying to drive revenue. We're trying to increase the number of customers that we've got. There's only so many levers that a business has. Either increase the number of customers, or we increase the number of things that those customers buy, or we increase the price that they buy those products at, or we reduce the churn, or we reduce the cost of providing those products. So there's like 6 or 7 levers that we've got, and we're all after the same thing, right? So it's either more customers, more sales, bigger baskets, higher basket value, reduced churn, whatever else it is. And so I think I said to you once, I see sales as a customer of marketing, an internal customer. So if I am the marketing department, one of my jobs is to give the sales team everything that they need in order to do their jobs. So that's to give them the right product. That's to give them the right pricing. That's to give them the right messaging. That's to help do positioning in a way that, and brand that builds trust. That means that somebody will take somebody's phone call or will answer an email because that trust has been established by the marketing team and the brand. And so if there's a disconnect between sales and marketing, then why is that? Is it because we're trying to set a price in the marketplace as a price leader and say, you know what, we think that customers will buy this product for $1,000. And the sales guy who's being, he's got a short-term KPI and he's got to the end of the month and he's like, I'm not going to get my bonus if I don't sell this product, but I can't sell this product at $1,000. So he discounts it just to get, his commission and the market. And that's where the conflicts kind of come about, because the KPIs are not aligned. I see that all the time, but I don't see why there should really be any conflict between sales and marketing, because we're all trying to do the same thing.
That's it. And I think I love that analogy of, it's internal, see it as a customer, which is quite a powerful way to look at things. On a little different note, you live in Dubai. Can you talk to us about what's life like in Dubai, and how did a CMO of your status and expertise end up living in Dubai? We can hear the Australian accent, and I think when we first first spoke, I was like, oh, he's got an Aussie accent. For some reason, when I just saw your LinkedIn, I hadn't connected the dots until we had our meeting. I was like, oh, wait a minute, he's got an Aussie accent. So yeah. What made you go live in Dubai? What's it like over there? And yeah.
So it was an accident, like a lot of things. So I left Australia in, I think, 99. I had the ability to get an ancestry visa for the UK. So I did a bit of backpacking through Asia and through Europe, and I ended up in London in the early .com sort of boom, which was great because it was, it was a lot of fun, a lot of VC money floating around, a lot of startups, a lot of, kind of cool stuff going on. And then did that for a while. Had my own marketing MarTech startup. Again, a little bit pre-social media, but we managed to sell it to NASCAR, Manchester United. It was a way that sporting clubs and sporting brands could engage with their fan base digitally through the desktop of their PCs. So that was pretty interesting. And then because of that, I went into sort of sports marketing and sponsorship, which I think is a really interesting, we could have a whole podcast on sponsorship and as a marketing tool, which is a really misunderstood part of marketing. Again, this sort of, people think that sticking your brand on the side of an F1 car is for the sort of visual element of it, but it's got nothing to do with it. And then, we ended up in Dubai because just opportunity. And at the time, it was all very new. I think COVID, there was perhaps this happened in other places in the world, businesses were forced to transform digitally. The businesses that didn't have e-commerce before COVID were forced to get e-commerce during COVID. And so there was a real acceleration of technologies via that. But Dubai is a fascinating place, not just Dubai, but the UAE and the region. The difference is that if the leadership, and they are visionary in terms of their leadership, if the leadership say we want this to happen, then they have the ability to make it happen. Whereas I think in certain democracies around the world, if it has to go through a parliamentary debate and then a certain amount of legislation has to be passed, and that legislation has got lobby groups and everything else surrounding it, then the vision can't ever be implemented because there's too many people trying to fight it. Whereas if you're in somewhere like Saudi or UAE, they can say, right, this is our AI strategy, and they have a national AI strategy for 2030. And all the government departments are signed up to their AI strategy for 2030. They have a sustainability strategy that everyone is signed up to. They have a whole bunch of visions and strategies that they're implementing. So that's a really interesting thing. I think also there is a sort of a no limit attitude, which is crazy. If you're an architect and you're working in London, you can only do so much because there's planning permission and there's a whole bunch of other things that you think. If you come to the Middle East and you say to an architect, I want you to build me a tower, and there's no limits. You can imagine whatever you can imagine, we'll build it, right?
Wow.
And I think that's also why a lot of they wanted to attract crypto. There's a lot of crypto and blockchain startups here. There's a lot of fintech startups here. They went all in on the metaverse and Web3. I'm not sure that's gone away. So in terms of my long-term trends, crypto's not going to go away. Web3 and metaverse are not going to go away. They might not be the big monolithic, everyone's in the same 3D Facebook kind of idea that we had 3 years ago, but there will be a version of metaverses. So I don't think they're going away. And then, there's the whole bunch of other really interesting, and even like sustainability in the Middle East. You wouldn't think about it, but the investment going into solar farms and some of the stuff that's happening is really interesting.
Wow. And I love how you said when they have something, they want to build something, let's say from the government, they're all in alignment. There's no debating. There's no two parties. They just go and get it done. That's quite powerful. So David,
I mean,
I'd like to play a game.
There might be downsides to that, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I want to play a game, which is I'll give you a word, and then whatever comes to your mind on word, you say it, and then I can get you to explain. So, for example, right. Customer experience.
Yeah, customer experience. Misunderstood.
Explain. Oh, I like that. What do you mean?
Yeah, so I think customer experience has been kind of co-opted as a new word, or a new word for customer support. Most people, when they think about customer experience, or many people when they think about customer experience, think about call centers and chat and after the purchase type of support, customer support. For me, customer experience is the journey from awareness of a product or service all the way through to the use of that product or service. And so that's a really long thing, and it can be incredibly complicated. So, for example, the customer experience for a tourist going to a city, right? That doesn't start when they get out of Tullamarine or Kingston Smith and get into a cab. That starts way, way back, where they get into the cab at the other end, at the beginning of their journey. That travel experience starts way, way back, and that's the same for onboarding for a bank, for example. So customer experience for a neobank includes downloading the app. Is that an easy thing to do? On doing the KYC, which is know your customer thing, is that easy to do? Neobanks like Revolut and those types of things have actually made a differentiation or a competitive advantage because they've used technology to make the onboarding process, the customer experience of onboarding, seamless and frictionless, using facial recognition, for example. So I hold my phone up to my face, I upload my biometric ID, it compares the two, it says, yep, there's your bank account. It happens in minutes. Whereas a traditional bank is still saying, I'll come down to the branch, fill out a bunch of forms, and we'll get back to you in a week once we've looked at your 5 forms of printed ID on and everything else. So customer experience can be a competitive advantage, again, within a commoditized market. And part of the product and the product experience and the product design is there's a marketing element to that, right? So again, what do we want to do? We want to be the easiest bank in the world to use. That's a marketing decision. What is our competitive advantage? Oh, the speed at which we can onboard you and get you into an account. So yeah, that's customer experience. Again, it's a 3-day training course that we can do.
We have to do. We got sponsorship one, customer experience, different ones.
CEO. Yeah, interesting. I think CEO is a different. Let me actually rephrase that. So I'm going to say CXO. Whether you're talking about CMO, CFO, CTO, CEO, the most important letters in those acronyms are the C and the O. And often people misunderstand what both of those letters actually mean. And for me, both of those have real meaning. So the C means you are the most important person in that function in the organization. You can't be a CMO if there's a vice president of marketing above you. It doesn't work. If you are the C, you are the top. The buck stops here. Anything to do with marketing is me. And so for the CEO, that means everything. You are the chief executive, and the O is really important, officer. You are an officer of the company, which means you have a fiduciary duty to your shareholders, to your customers, to your team, to everybody, to make sure that accountability and governance and all those things are being done correctly. And if something's not being done correctly, then it's your fault. And I think there's a lot of CEOs who kind of more recently have tried to get around the fact that they are the ultimate office holder and are responsible for all decisions. Ultimately, all decisions of the company come back to the CEO. So, yeah, I think that people often misunderstand the O part. You have a responsibility that if you see something that is a little bit, whatever else, you're not really allowed. And again, under company law in Australia, if you're a director of a company and somebody underneath you is doing something that's incorrect, then you can be personally liable for those decisions. So it's important that you understand your responsibility as a C-suite executive, and often you need to show a little backbone as well, and maybe stand up to others from a moral standpoint to sort of say, you know what, this isn't right. We're ripping our customers off, or we're doing something that is a slightly grey area within the regulations, and I'm going to put my hand up and say I object to this. I want it to be on the record that I object to this, because otherwise it could come back and bite.
Yeah, man. And you see in all these big companies that the CEO makes a mistake, a big one, boom, you're gone, because like you said, it all comes back down to you. So we've run out of time, David. This has obviously been amazing. It's crazy how time just flies when you're having fun. But I really do appreciate your vision.
I did have. I don't know if we've got 2 minutes, because I did have 2 pieces of advice for people.
Please do. Yes.
Yeah. So the first one is travel. And I don't mean travel to a resort and eat the same breakfast that you eat, every other day of the year. I mean travel to places that push you out of your comfort zone, to experience different cultures, to experience different points of view. Because I think the more people put themselves in other people's shoes, the more tolerant they can be of those views, and an understanding which isn't just coming from mainstream media that, these people think this, or these people are all like this, whatever else. So travel, experience new things, put yourself out of your comfort zone. And the second piece of advice, which I think is related to that, is don't atrophy. A lot of people get to a certain point within their career and they just stop. And whatever they knew at that point in time, whether it's a technology, whether it's a social media platform, whether it's a way of thinking, they just get stuck in that particular viewpoint, and they never move on. So my second piece of advice is to make sure that you're always, again, pushing your brain to accept new things, try new things, and not just go, this worked at this point in time and I was happy for me and it worked for me. Keep trying to exercise that muscle that is the brain, and change and keep changing. So they're the two pieces of advice that I would give.
I love the one on travel. It's so true. And even your CEO, your CMO in marketing, that ability to travel and see different things, go to different places, see how customers are, just see people, see different things. That lens that it gives you, then you come back into your business and you apply those things is quite powerful. So yes, thank you so much for the advice. And we will put your details once this goes up on YouTube and Spotify for any companies out there who want to get in touch with you. And just real quick, in terms of your capacity, do you have capacity to take on, other companies and clients who are looking for a fractional CMO?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got capacity, especially coming up to January. We'll have a little bit more capacity, but I also have a network of other fractional C-level executives, whether they're CFOs or CTOs, which are complementaries that I don't do. And so, I think it's all about recommendation and authenticity, as we sort of mentioned at the beginning, personal brand. That's actually how it works, because how else do you find a CMO unless they come recommended from someone else? So yes, we do have capacity, and yes, we do have other associates that we can recommend in other areas.
Yeah, perfect. All right. Thank you so much, David. We'll keep in touch. And hope people got so much value out of this like I did.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks. Hey, what's wrong? Bro, I'm stressed out. I'm running my business. I've got to serve my customers, but I need more customers coming in. I can't keep relying on word of mouth. Why don't you just use ETS Rabasha Media? Who? Well, with AI now, what they do is they go in, get your perfect clients, bring them in front of you. So all I got to do is run my business and he brings me opportunities. Think about it. You speak to 3,000 of your ideal customers, convert 1% of that 3,000. That's 30 people. 30 people in a room with you. Can you convert that? Of course I'll close them. I'm good at what I do. I just don't have time to be going and looking for my perfect client. Focus on what you love doing and let them bring you customers. When you win, they win, commission, ching. Sujira Rabasha, huh? Yeah, Sujira Rabasha. Go and Google them, man. Come on, take it to the bank.
If you really enjoyed this video, make sure to click here, and I'm sure you're going to love that one.